Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Bhadidamastu Mahavidvishavake. Now today's subject is steps to God realization. Now, generally speaking, in Vedantic tradition, the idea of God or the concept of God realization or spiritual enlightenment has got a specific meaning. When you are talking about realizing God, you are not gaining a new knowledge. We are only realizing our true nature. This is a basic concept. We are rediscovering ourselves. We are, in fact, removing all the wrong notions that we have accumulated in our mind. And when this wrong understanding, these wrong ideas, when these wrong notions are removed, then we rediscover our true nature. So, through God realization, we are not getting a new knowledge. We are not reaching somewhere, leaving some place behind. We are not producing a new idea or information or anything which is new. As I said earlier, we are rediscovering ourselves. This is explained in Vedantic tradition in the light of an analogy, which I generally describe on every occasion, especially in discussions related to Upanishads. The analogy is perhaps familiar to many of us, but it's very important for us to remember in this context of God realization. Suppose a tiny object, something coiled up, is lying on the floor, and there is not enough light in the room. The windows are closed. There is only a dim bulb burning. In fact, that object is a piece of rope. So the way it is presented, slightly curved or coiled up, gives the wrong idea, wrong notion that it is perhaps a snake. Those who have seen a snake the previous day, which may be similar to this object, may think it is a snake. And those who have seen a twig or a stick may think it is a stick. And those who may associate the shape of a crack on the floor may think this is just a crack on the floor, it is not a rope. Like that, 100 people may have 100 different notions, all because they do not know that this is actually a piece of rope. Now, when you bring light or when you open the windows, what happens? All these wrong notions, the notion that it is a snake or stick or a crack on the floor or whatever may be, 100 people may have 100 different wrong ideas about that object. All these wrong notions vanish. And you understand, you realize that it is the rope. Now, the fact that it is a rope is not the result of the light that you bring. Even if you don't bring light, even if that object remains in that room in pitch darkness, it will be a rope. Even if you do not realize that it is a rope, still it will be a rope. Similarly, the fact that we are inherently divine, we are by our very nature divine, the Atman, the self-effulgent Atman, the immanent principle residing in all living beings, the all-pervading reality, this fact doesn't depend upon your realization. Even if you think you are this body, you are not this body, you are the Atman. So when I speak about God, a point should be made clear at this point. The idea of God has got different dimensions. The primitive person may think God is somebody sitting somewhere like a supervisor with a mighty big stick in his hand, ready to pounce upon you, punish you if you do something wrong even by mistake, or reward you if you obey him. This is, well, from Vedantic standpoint, this is not wrong, but this is only an incomplete idea of God. Swami Vivekananda said, we are not traveling from error to truth, but we are traveling from truth that's lower to truth that is higher. So, even the most primitive concept of the absolute reality of God may not be necessarily wrong, but it is only a partial understanding of the reality. So, for the highest standpoint in Vedantic tradition, even if you do not realize that we are the Atman, we are the self-effulgent reality, we are the all-pervading reality, that we are the transcendental reality, we are inherently divine, this fact doesn't depend upon our realization of this fact. Just as the fact that it is a piece of rope that's lying in the room does not depend upon your bringing the light. The light that you bring removes the darkness. And along with darkness, all the wrong notions are also removed. And then what happens? The rope reveals itself to be what it is. Similarly, in Vedantic tradition, God realization means removal of all wrong notions that we have with regard to what we are. We think we are this body. We may think we are this mind. At a higher level, we may think we are the intellect. Or we may think that we are just a creation, part of creation. Like that, there are so many different levels of understanding. So, when we realize our true nature, that we are the divine, inherent, immanent principle, the all-pervading, transcendental principle, all these wrong notions are removed, no new knowledge comes to us. So God realization, in fact, in a way, it suffers from a serious problem, the problem of language, because no language is an adequate tool, an efficient instrument to explain a higher metaphysical idea, then what to speak of a higher spiritual idea? Because spirituality goes beyond metaphysics. So that's a point you have to remember. When we use this term God realization, it reveals the inadequacy of the language as a tool, as an instrument to express what is beyond expression. It is an attempt in words to explain what actually is beyond words. So this problem has to be kept in mind when we analyze the subjects. So what I was trying to drive home was there is an evolution at the level of the idea of God, and in parallel to this, there is an evolution at the level of the seeker, the spiritual aspirant himself. As we evolve spiritually, as we grow forward spiritually, we get a more and more complete idea of the reality. Rather, we get a less and less incomplete idea of the reality. And when we really understand the reality, we realize that this reality is non-distinct, non-different from ourselves. So, as I said, God realization is not gaining a new knowledge or a new information. It is only a kind of rediscovering our own true nature. This knowledge doesn't come from outside. The wrong notions that we have accumulated within ourselves are removed. And when these wrong notions are removed, as a result of the removal of ignorance, then the reality expresses itself, because the reality does not require the instrument of a revealer. The reality is self-revealing by its true nature. So this is the point which I want to emphasize. Now I shall explain this in the light of a very interesting, a celebrated dialogue between two great philosophers. The dialogue is taken from the greatest of the Vedantic literature, namely Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Upanishads constitute the very foundation of Vedantic wisdom and Vedantic knowledge. And Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is the greatest, the most sublime, and the most celebrated Upanishad. And Shankaracharya's commentary on this is supposed to be an unsurpassed philosophical, metaphysical literature. In the words of Paul Deussen, he said when he read a distant translation because he became familiar with Sanskrit language, when he read it, a translation from French into German he said, all the knowledge that he had accumulated earlier had to be removed from him as to what the real meaning of human existence is. These are the words of Paul Deussen, because he was supposed to be the greatest Western Indologist who made a thorough study of the Upanishad literature. I shall just give you an outline of this dialogue. In this dialogue, there is a teacher. The teacher's name is Yajnavalkya. And the student is a great emperor of ancient India. His name is Janaka. Janaka himself figures as a great celebrated exponent of Vedanta in Vedantic literature. But Yajnavalkya was the supreme teacher of that age. So one day, this great sage, Yajnavalkya, we can say the Socrates of those days, came to Janaka. And Janaka puts a question to him. A very simple question. Even a child can put this question to his father. How are we able to walk, to act, to move about, to live in this world? What is the light which enables us to move about, to do things, to travel about in this world? This is the question. Very simple question from an empirical point of view. And Yajnavalkya's answer is obvious. It is sunlight. That everyone knows. It is sunlight that enables us to live in this world. Without sunlight, we can't think of human existence, normal human life. So it is sunlight, or it is the sun which enables human beings to live in this world, to walk about, to go about his or her day-to-day activities. Well, then Janaka's next question: how subtle, in a subtle way, how Janaka enters from the phenomenal to the noumenal questions of human existence. So then Janaka's next question, well, in the evening what happens? When sun has set, sun has vanished, there is no more sunlight. What enables human beings to walk about, to live in this world, to go about his or her day-to-day activities? The answer is obviously it's moonlight. It is moonlight. The question is, Astamide Yajnavalkya Koyam Purushayidi. See, the point is, suppose when the sun has set in the west, there is no more sunlight available. What enables human beings to move about? Moonlight. Then next question. Well, there is no moonlight. Well, suppose there is pitch darkness, dark clouds, it is night, midnight. There is neither sunlight nor moonlight. What enables you to see things? Well, fire. In ancient times, there used to be primitive torches made of different leaves of grass and so on. Fire or you can start a firelight. The light of fire enables you to see things. But suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, nor fire. Then what enables you to see things, to know things? The answer is speech. Well, suppose you are staying in a dark room. It is pitch darkness inside the room, no sunlight, no moonlight. You cannot lit a candle, so there is no firelight, no fire. How do you know about things taking place around you or outside of you? Well, you may hear sound, a vehicle passing in the streets. You don't see the vehicle because there is no sunlight, no moonlight, nor fire. But you can hear the sound. So it is speech, shabda. It is speech or sound that enables you to know the presence, the existence of a vehicle moving in the streets. Now remember, the word used in Sanskrit for this light is jyoti. Jyoti doesn't really mean light alone. Jyoti means something which reveals, or something in whose presence things get revealed. Things automatically get revealed. That's the meaning of jyoti. So, 4 jyotis, 4 lights are mentioned. Surya Jyoti, Chandra Jyoti, Agnir Jyoti, Vak Jyoti. Surya Jyoti means sun or sunlight. Chandra Jyoti means moon or moonlight. Agnir Jyoti means fire or light of fire. The 4th is Shabda Jyoti. Now, if you translate the word Jyoti as light, how do you associate the idea of light with the word? So, the great commentator Shankaracharya would tell you that here light doesn't mean physical light. What is the function of light? The function of light is that the light reveals itself, and also it reveals everything around it. If you lit a candle in a room, you can see the light, you can see the candle, and in the light of the candle, you can also see things around the candle. So, jyoti or light means something which reveals other things and also reveals itself. Now, here, speech or sound becomes the jyoti, the revealer of the presence of a car moving in the streets. Because, as I said earlier, there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, and still, and your eyes are closed, you are staying in a pitch dark room, still you come to know of the presence of a car moving the street by listening to the sound. All right, then Janaka asked the fifth or the last question. And the last question takes you straight to the highest Vedantic concept. Janaka's question is simple, but from an empirical, from a superficial point of view, but it has got a great metaphysical and spiritual significance. Janaka asked the question, well, Yajnavalkya, there is no sunlight, there is no moonlight, no fire, and you are deaf. Suppose you can't hear anything. Then, is there any way you can know about things? Well, you see, suppose you go to sleep. Either you are in deep sleep or you are experiencing a dream. Your eyes are closed. Certainly you are not hearing things, physical sounds you are not hearing. You are not getting any help from the sunlight, the moonlight, the fire, or any sound, because you can't hear. But you will be experiencing, you are walking in the San Francisco street, you are running, you are seeing vehicles all around you. So many things you will be seeing, you will be hearing, you have so many experiences in dream. What is that light? What is that power which enables you to see and experience these things? Or in deep sleep, where all these lights are absent. So, Yajnavalkya's answer is Atma Jyoti. So, when there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire, no sound, then also there is something within you which reveals things. And if this reality within you is absent, then sunlight won't help you to see things. Moonlight won't help you to see things. So also fire, candlelight, or sound or speech won't help you to know anything about in this world. So what is the essence of all lights? What is the supreme revealer in the presence of which everything gets revealed? What is the supreme revealer from which sun, moon, fire and speech borrow their efficiency to reveal things? That is the Atma Jyoti, the Atman or the self, the light of the self. Now, through this dialogue, Yajnavalkya teaches Janaka that in reality there is only one light. Light should not be understood as candlelight or sunlight or any kind of physical light. This light is the inner light. The light of all lights. It's called Jyotisham Jyoti. The Sanskrit term is used. It is the light of all lights. It is a revealer of all revealing factors, revealing agencies, revealing forces. And once this light is realized, then everything becomes revealed. So God realization in Vedanta, in a way, it is a kind of inward journey, a kind of spiritual homecoming in search of our own true nature, leading to spiritual self-discovery. As I said, this light, this knowledge doesn't come from outside. Sunlight comes from outside. Moonlight comes from outside. The light of fire comes from outside, because these things are existing outside of us. Speech also. But this light is existing within us. In fact, this light, this Atma Jyoti or Atma, self, is our true nature. In its presence, all other lights become functional. In the absence of this supreme light, all other lights become non-functional. So, Yajnavalkya slowly turns Janaka's eyes inward. Janaka was looking outward. He was asking questions about the sunlight, the moonlight, fire, and speech. Yajnavalkya took him step by step and ultimately turned him in his journey, turned him inward. So when Janaka started his inner pilgrimage, he realized, he reached the stage of self-discovery that the light of all lights is the light of Atman, the light of the self. And this light is beyond this body, beyond this intellect, beyond all these physical elements. When this light is present, you are able to see everything. When this light is absent, sunlight may be blazing overhead, but a dead man cannot see things. You may light a candle in front of him, he can't see. You may blow a terrible sound, he can't hear. Because this inner revealer, the inner light, has left the body. Body, sense organs, mind and intellect are only instruments, tools through which this self-revealing supreme light reveals itself. They are instruments. This light is revealed through these instruments. And as we start our inward journey in search of this self-discovery, we have to follow certain disciplines. These disciplines are explained in another Vedantic classic. The classic, many of you must have studied. It is a small book, Viveka Chudamani. Here Shankaracharya helps you by giving a brief description of the different tools, different instruments, and different ways of sharpening these instruments, which help us in this inward spiritual journey, which he calls sadhana chadushtayam. The first instrument the first stage or the first necessary ingredient which every spiritual pilgrim who starts his journey in search of his own true nature has to attain is a sense of proper discrimination. Discrimination is a term used here. It has no other connotation. Here discrimination means an ability to understand what is actually real and what is not real. That's the only sense in which Viveka is the word used, which is sometimes inadequately translated in English as discrimination. But Viveka means discrimination with wisdom. That's the real meaning. So very often the Viveka should be translated as wisdom, which enables us to choose between what is false and what is genuine. Now, as I said earlier, there are two types of evolutions taking place in spiritual life. On the one hand, the evolution at the stage, or the evolution with regard to our understanding of the absolute reality. A primitive person may think that God is a most uncompromising, a tyrannical, a no-nonsense person sitting somewhere with a mighty big stick in his hands, ready to punish you if you, even by mistake, commit a small mistake, or to reward you if you obey him blindly. Well, this, as I said, this is the beginning of spiritual life. This is not wrong, but this, as I said earlier, this is only an incomplete understanding of the absolute reality. Vedanta never negates, never rejects any idea of spiritual life or God or human existence. Vedanta actually opens its doors to all. But it tells you this is not highest. You have yet to go a long way forward. Now, and as you evolve further, you realize the supreme reality is the immanent, the omnipresent, the transcendental reality, as I said, the supreme revealer, which is present in every being, which is all-pervading. This is the highest understanding. Now, before reaching this, we have many other levels of choosing. You know, most of us have got an idea of priority in life, depending upon our status, our profession, our vocation. A sense of priority. Now, Vedanta tells us that those who want to take this spiritual journey seriously should become mentally non-attached. I won't use the word detached. Non-attached towards the lower realities. Money, wealth, status, and so on. All these things may appear to be necessary. They may be necessary, but they are only instrumental values. They are not supreme, ultimate values. The supreme value is spiritual enlightenment, what we may call God, in that highest Vedantic sense, of course. Spiritual unfoldment is the ultimate value. So, all other lower values should be subordinated to this higher spiritual value. This is the first step for anyone who starts this inward spiritual journey in search of his own true nature. It's called Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka in the language of Shankaracharya. Means a proper idea of priority between what is real, what is unreal. A normal person living in this world cannot ignore or neglect his responsibilities. He should not. He should not. But at the same time, he should also consider there is something beyond all this, and that is the higher spiritual unfoldment. This is Nitya. Everything else is Anitya. So Nitya means eternal. And what is eternal? The eternal value is spiritual unfoldment. This sense of priority is the first step in spiritual life. Otherwise, mostly we divert our time and energy into wrong channels. And that will make us obsessed with the unreal, with the secondary, empirical, worldly pleasures and worldly pursuits. Worldly pursuits need not be neglected. Your profession, all other activities should not be and need not be neglected. But even when we are engaged in these worldly pursuits, we must keep in mind there is something beyond all this, which transcends all this. This sense of priority is the first step in spiritual journey. And the second step that is mentioned is that we must give up all obsessions, all desires for worldly pursuits. Means we must not consider worldly pursuits as the highest ambition in our life. See, all human beings have got a sense of goal, sense of supreme ideal. Everyone. A sportsman may be dreaming about getting an Olympic medal. Or a musician may have an ambition of becoming a world-famous musician, and so on. So every person has got a sense of desire, sense of ambition, which is not wrong actually. But suppose you can look upon these pursuits as part of your spiritual unfoldment. See, there have been great musicians for whom music was an instrument for spiritual enlightenment. There have been great artists, philosophers, thinkers who sublimated their pursuits to a higher spiritual level. So, if one could sublimate his or her ideal of life to the level of spirituality, that will remind you of your supreme goal. On the other hand, if we consider that worldly pursuit is the beginning and also the end of human existence, then it becomes a stumbling block in spiritual life. And also we should not have any ambition for gaining something in the form of physical pleasures in afterlife. Technically it is called Ikamutra Phala Bhoga Viraga. I am trying to interpret it in the language of our own times. We should not be obsessed with any kind of material ambitions or desires, either in this life or next life. Because any kind of desire takes you away from your spiritual pursuit. After all, if you analyze the characteristics of human beings, you find his ultimate ideal, need not be spiritual, reveals his character and his idea of the highest achievement in life. So there have been, as I said, there have been great musicians, philosophers, thinkers, painters, and so on, who sublimated their art and their aesthetic proficiency and achievements to higher spiritual goal. But instead of that, if they keep them under the lower level, then it becomes a stumbling block in spiritual life. The third discipline that is mentioned is a sense of inner control and external control. Control of the senses. As I said on another occasion, there are two types of people in the world. One set of people believe that giving full freedom to the senses is the way to happiness. That's what really happens. Another set of people who are supposed to be mystics and spiritual personalities believe that restraining their senses, freedom from their senses, leads to real freedom. So, in other words, freedom given to senses leads to spiritual slavery, and freedom from the tyranny of senses leads to spiritual mastery, spiritual self-discovery. This is a third discipline. So, as I said, there are two types of people. Those who believe that the world is meant for enjoyment and giving full freedom to the senses and going in search of the objects of desire in the company of the senses is the ultimate way to peace and happiness. But the reality is, this leads to spiritual slavery. So freedom to the senses leads to spiritual slavery, because you are a slave of the senses. But any attempt to restrain the senses, to go beyond the level of senses, to look beyond the present, beyond the empirical, beyond the phenomenal, leads you to freedom in the true sense of the term. That is self-mastery or self-discovery. And according to Vedantic tradition, the third important discipline is we must try to divert our senses into creative channels so that the senses will not create a stumbling block in spiritual life. Senses cannot be forcibly withdrawn from their objects. So, Vedantic philosophers and also yoga philosophers like Patanjali, Vivekananda Bhikshu, the commentator, and others, they are unanimous in pointing out one important idea. That is, senses cannot be forcibly withdrawn from their objects. Suppose you say, I won't see that object again if you take a strong decision. Then you will be always reminding you that you should not see that object. In other words, you will be always seeing that object mentally. If you always remind yourself against remembering an object. What does it mean? Physically you are not seeing the object, but mentally you are always seeing the object, which is even more harmful in spiritual life. So therefore, all the great spiritual thinkers are unanimous in one view. That is, the senses cannot be and should not be forcibly withdrawn from their objects, but they should be sublimated, they should be diverted into creative channels. Instead of reading bad books, you may read good books, which will feed the mind with creative, spiritually helpful ideas. Instead of hearing spiritually harmful things, listen to words and ideas which are spiritually helpful, which again will reinforce the spiritual culture of the inner mind. And similarly, all the five senses of perception can be given a Godward, a spiritual orientation. This is called spiritual sublimation. And this is the third step that is recommended by Shankaracharya, Shama, Damadi, Satka, Sambhati, etc. I won't go into those explanations from the traditional angle, from the traditional point of view. I am just trying to give a modern interpretation. The same reality, the same idea, but given an interpretation which is intelligible to our own times. This is called the spiritual sublimation of the senses, which leads to spiritual mastery. Because senses, as I said, senses can be controlled by diverting them towards creative channels. They won't keep quiet. If you do not divert your senses into creative channels, they will divert themselves into destructive channels because they cannot keep quiet. Mind also doesn't keep quiet. Therefore, mind should be filled with spiritually helpful ideas by diverting the senses towards creative channels, because it is the combined effort of the senses that brings ideas into mind, good or bad ideas. And the fourth important qualification that is necessary for anyone who undertakes this spiritual journey is an intense desire for spiritual enlightenment, spiritual unfoldment. It's called mumukshutvam. Literally means an intense desire for liberation. Actually, it could be put this way. We must have a strong desire to go beyond, to go ahead. This is very important. In fact, psychologically speaking, everyone has got a strong desire for something. If somebody tells you, well, I'm not interested in spirituality, it means he is interested in many other things. No one can remain from some kind of strong desire or ambition. Psychologically, it is impossible. Even a moron, even an idiot, I mean, in the sense, those who are a very, very low IQ level, even people of that category, intellectual category, will have a very strong drive, desire, an obsession, some kind of ideal which they are aiming at, which they want to achieve, which they consider to be the goal to be reached. Everyone has got it. From the most illiterate man or woman to the most enlightened spiritual person or philosopher, all of them have got one or other high ideal which they are aiming at, which they want to achieve, which they want to reach. Now, if somebody says, I'm not getting time for spiritual practices, I'm not getting time for reading good books, it means he's getting plenty of time for reading unholy books or other kinds of activities. So what is required is to develop a strong desire for spiritual values, spiritual ideas, spiritual unfoldment. Because a strong desire and a strong determination will create a tremendous dynamo of energy and power within you. And not only that, a sense of strong determination, a sense of strong spiritual ambition will help you to orient, to organize all your resources Time and energy, these are the two types of resources we have at our disposal. Time, energy, which everyone has got. So these resources can be organized and oriented towards a higher creative channel. See, look at a man like Newton. How did he become such a great scientist, physicist? Maybe in those days when the higher instruments and equipments were not discovered, not developed. Earlier, during the early days, scientists had to depend so much upon their own intellectual intuition, higher mental faculties, because they could not make it. There were no computers, there were no sophisticated electronic gadgets or instruments. So they had to depend so much upon their own inherent intuitive faculties and abilities. But they had nothing else to think about. And that took him one day to the highest discovery, the theory of gravitation. Just as a sage or a saint in ancient India sat in a hermitage in a forest and turned his inquiry inward through meditation, discovered a spiritual truth. Similarly, a great scientist in modern times discovers a great secret of nature by turning his inquiry outward. Both can be called sages or saints. A great scientist has to control, has to organize, has to orient all his faculties and senses towards a higher goal. But that goal is only empirical. It only helps him to knock at the doors of nature, external nature, and the nature opens its doors and reveals a secret. But in ancient times, the great sages did the same, but they turned their journey inward. And then the nature revealed great spiritual secrets. As I said, Yajnavalkya, Janaka, the great dialogue between the great teacher Yajnavalkya and Janaka. Yajnavalkya was a great saint who did meditation, who practiced meditation for years, for decades in isolated forest hermitages. That is how he discovered. So, inquiry is the same, but in science, the inquiry is turned to the external world and nature reveals its secrets. In spirituality, inquiry is turned inward and our own true nature is revealed. It leads to self-discovery. That's called Atma Jyoti, I already explained earlier. Interestingly, I'm tempted to quote one famous hymn from Rigveda Samhita. It comes in the 10th mandala of Rigveda. It's a famous hymn. It's called the Hymn of Creation, or Creation Hymn, or Hymn of Creation, Srishti Suktam. It gives a highly metaphysical and mystical interpretation of the mystery of creation and the mystery of human life. There is one mantra, Sato Bendhum Asadi Niravindan Hridi Pradeshya Kavayo Manisha. The meaning is this. The ancient sages went in search of the cause of the universe, the origin of the universe, the final cause of the universe. And they turned their inquiry into the external world. But they could not discover the origin of the universe in the external world. And then, when they turned their inquiry inward, they discovered the origin of the universe, the mystery of human existence. And they found that origin of the universe within themselves. And they found this reality is omnipresent. They found it within themselves. So they discovered the immanence of the reality. And simultaneously, they discovered the same immanent reality is also all-pervading and it is also the transcendental reality. This is how one of the most famous and celebrated hymns in Rigveda Samhita ends. Swami Vivekananda has referred to this sukta on one or two famous occasions. It comes the 10th mantala. Nasadasi, no sadasi tadanim. In the beginning there was neither existence nor non-existence. That's how it begins. And ultimately the sages try to find out the real mystery, the real meaning, the origin of the universe. And then knock at the doors of external nature. But the nature didn't open its doors because nothing to reveal. The real origin of the universe cannot be found outside of themselves. Then they turned their inquiry inward. And when they did turn their inquiry inward, they discovered themselves, their own immanent real nature, to be the origin of the universe. And then they discovered that reality is all-pervading and also transcendental. And this is the method of self-discovery explained in the Vedantic text. So thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. That's Sri Ramakrishna Order.